Good evening again. Ron Motta here, your host of Activate Worcester. We had a guest on a recent show who we found to be so exciting, so to speak, because of his program, that we asked if he would come back and do a sequel for us. And we were fortunate enough to have him come back again. And we have Father Fred Enman, who's a Worcester native, Grafton Hill, wherever that is, I'm kidding. A lot of roots, my wife would say roots, she's from Michigan, in the neighborhood, in the area. Taught at Holy Cross as part of his vocation years ago. Involved currently at Boston College. But what's really close to him is Matthew 25. And what I'd like to do is welcome Father Fred to Activate Worcester again.
Thank you very much, Ron.
And what I'd like you to do for folks who didn't see it last week, can you just tell them a little bit about Matthew 25 and what the ministry really is?
Sure. Matthew 25 is a private nonprofit organization that I helped to start back in 1988. It was a theology school project for me, and it has just grown over the years in ways that I didn't anticipate or expect at the time. But our focus is to do food relief and housing relief for people in need. Our conspicuous work has been the rehabilitation of abandoned houses, mostly here in Worcester. And when the houses are completed, we continue to own them, and we rent the apartments out to low-income families. And I've been very blessed to have a lot of help with the program from many benefactors and many volunteers. And I'm very grateful to Worcester Technical High School for basically adopting us as their shop project and providing carpentry, electrical, plumbing, painting and decorating services to us. Wow. And I'm very grateful to Youth Build Worcester for also taking us on and providing us with some very wonderful skilled carpentry services.
And all of that's being donated?
That's all donated, no cost to us. All we have to do for the Worcester Technical High School, state law requires that there be a toilet on site, a telephone on site, and that we have a workers' comp policy for them. So we arrange all of that. That's our only commitment. And the teachers and the students come and they do wonderful work in all the building trades.
And this is without you being there to in essence, be the subcontractor for all this.
I don't have to be there personally. I have a Worcester area director who is usually on site when any of the volunteers are there. But the students are very fortunate because they're being taught by master level practitioners in their trade.
Fabulous.
So the plumbers have a master level teacher. The carpenters, a master level teacher. The electricians, master level.
You also mentioned that it's, in addition to the housing and so forth, there's also a food ministry component to this. Is that still operational as well?
It still happens. It's somewhat limited. I get a lot of donations from Boston College alumni, particularly the class of 1987. And all the donations that I get from them each year, a third of that money goes to food relief. And of that third, 1/2 goes to the Greater Boston Food Bank, and a third goes to the Jesuit food program in Kingston, Jamaica.
Much needed.
Absolutely.
Much needed. That's great. That's great. You mentioned partnerships. We talked about folks being able to come and physically do the work, but it costs money, pardon me, for the actual bricks and mortar and everything else that you're using, and the wood, etc. Where is that coming from?
Well, I have a pretty long list of benefactors, about 1,000 people altogether. The first group are my family and friends who I wrote to at Christmas time of 1990. I got a couple of $1,000s from them that first year. I now get about $10,000 from that group.
From the same group.
From the same group. And then
so it's more than seed money.
More than seed money. They're once they saw that it was actually working, I think they became more generous.
That's great.
St. John's High School, I went there in Shrewsbury, and I wrote to my classmates, and I've written to some other St. John's grads. And the first year, I got $2,000 in gifts from the pioneers, and now I'm getting about $10,000 a year from various
So
St.
because of
John's
your
grads.
personal contacts between family, friends, and St. John's, that's 20,000.
Yes,
Do you get corporate contributions as well?
I do. Before I get to the corporate, let me just mention Holy Cross alumni. I get about $30,000 a year in gifts from Holy Cross alumni. So that brings it up to about 50,000
Plus corporate.
plus corporate. And recently we have had some really rewarding experiences with corporate benefactors, specifically the St. Gobain Corporation here in Worcester
Fine
has
company.
really come through for us in a very significant way. Their headquarters are in Paris, France, and their company directors decided they want to make a large grant for housing initiatives, one in North America, one in Africa, and one in Europe. And we applied, and we were chosen to be the North
beneficiary.
American recipient. So we got a grant of 35,000 euros, which translated into about $52,000.
Yeah, sure.
And we used that on our property at number 7 Benefit Terrace.
That's wonderful.
And so that was great. And the local plant of St. Gobain has come through for us as well. This year they gave us a grant of $15,000. Last year they gave us a grant of $15,000. The year before they gave us a grant of $15,000. They added a little something extra into the mix this year. They set aside a work day. They sent us 30 of their employees one day in June.
30 of their best employees.
30 of their very best employees.
My son being one of them.
And they were great. They came and they worked right along with the youth build students who were there on site.
That's great.
They were putting up sheetrock on a couple of different floors in the house. Another group was on the outside putting up siding
Silly
on the
question.
exterior.
Is there any money that comes, let's say, from the city of Worcester for this at all?
Yes, we've had, for most of the houses, we received what are called federal home funds. These funds originate out of Washington, D.C., from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and they send funds to each city. Worcester gets about $1 million in federal home funds, or at least has been until recently. And we applied to the city, and we received home funds for almost all of our projects. More significantly, in recent times, we applied last year for a community development block grant for our current project. We applied for a $100,000 block grant. And fortunately for us, we were approved for the whole amount.
It's wonderful.
And we have already been reimbursed by the city for $56,000 of the expenses we have put into the house so far. In a way, it's a wonderful partnership to have the city involved like that with the federal funds, because we have so many of their own students from Worcester Technical High School working on site.
Good point.
So they're learning how to be plumbers, they're learning how to be electricians, and the experience they have on our site is a real world experience where they come in, they see a house that needs to be equipped in a certain way. The teachers talk them through the whole process, and then they come in and they do the work.
It sounds like there's a great deal of synergy involved with the entire program, it's a beautiful thing. But looking at it as a Worcester resident, and I'd like to maybe have a part of our conversation about some of the houses that you actually have. But if we could
Yes.
go there in a moment.
Yes.
But the question that I would have is observation, not really a question. You're taking houses that basically are one step away from being condemned,
Yes.
okay, which means they're a blight in the neighborhood and so on and so forth.
And in many cases, they've been being used as crack houses or for prostitution or for both.
So what you're doing really is upgrading the neighborhood big time by taking something that's nothing but trouble, turning it into almost a showplace, and maybe it becomes a catalyst to other good things happening in that same neighborhood.
In some cases, it has really helped to turn around the neighborhood. The first house we did was at 5052 Queen Street. beautiful old house, Second Empire style architecture. It is on the Massachusetts Historical Register. It was also on the city's demolition list. God. It was that bad. It was going to be torn down. This beautiful old house. And I got to it just in time. And with the help of my Matthew 25 supporters, we were able to turn that house around. It is now fully restored. It's gorgeous. We got an award from Preservation Worcester for excellence in design and the restoration of a neighborhood.
Before we talk about the actual houses, because I know there were some great stories there, can you just share with the viewers why Matthew 25? What's the genesis of it? Why did you select that particular passage, if you will, as a focal point for your whole ministry?
Sure. The reason I chose it is I was reading a book for school one day. I was taking a course on liberation theology and reading a book by a Jesuit from Central America, John Sobrino. And in the course of the book, he mentions what Christian communities need to be doing today is to make the values of the Gospels concrete. For example, Matthew 25 needs to be made concrete. And Matthew 25 is a judgment scene. Jesus separates the sheep from the goats, the good from the bad. And what makes the difference, the criteria of judgment, is whether or not you give food to the hungry, drink to the thirsty, welcome the stranger, clothe the naked, comfort the sick, and visit those in prison. When I was reading it, I knew what it was about beforehand, but for some reason on that reading, it really deeply moved me. And I resolved that if I could, someday I would try to make Matthew 25 concrete.
Not to oversimplify, but that, folks, that's kind of the whole ball game right there, if you think about it. If you can go by those particular tenets, what else is there?
It really gets at the heart and the core of human life and making sure there's a just society.
Indeed. How denominational or non-denominational is Matthew 25?
Matthew 25 is interdenominational. We have benefactors. We have people who come to work on our site from virtually every Christian faith, from the Jewish tradition. We've had some help from our friends in the Muslim community. So many different faiths and traditions
and
have been.
It transcends it all.
It transcends it all. People get involved in it because of the message of trying to do something good for people in need.
And I guess, folks, that my point is, whether you're a Catholic, Episcopalian, or none of the above, whatever, this is something that impacts everybody. Everybody. And this is something that you really should be giving some very, very serious thought to, of how to participate. At the conclusion of our discussion this evening, Father Fred will, in fact, give you some ideas of how to participate if you're so inclined. And there's many ways to do that. But I did want to get into some of the homes that you've actually been involved with. One in particular, well, there's many in particular. Everyone seems to have its own little name, and perhaps you can share with us the genesis of those as well. But tell us a little bit about the Susan Prunier house, please.
Okay. The Suzanne Prunier house is named after my niece, Suzanne Prunier. The reason that happened, it's an unfortunate reason. We had a family tragedy. My niece was a victim of domestic violence. Unfortunately, she was stabbed to death by her boyfriend 20 years ago in July of 1994.
That happened here in Worcester?
It happened in Malden.
In Malden. I remember reading about that.
And Suzanne was born in Worcester. She was raised in Auburn. She went to UMass. She had a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree. She was an extremely talented artist. I couldn't believe the kind of artwork she was doing. And I had already started Matthew 25 when she went out to Boston for her first job. And although this was way below her skill level, she said, "Uncle Fred, when you're ready to paint the interior of that Matthew 25 house,
Call on me.
Let me know. I'm going to come and I'll help you paint the rooms." Wow. She could have done a mural, a really gorgeous mural, but she was just going to help me paint. So after she was killed, it was devastating for me. It was devastating for my sister, her mother, devastating for my brother-in-law, devastating for her siblings, her cousins, her friends. I went to see my board of directors and I said, I need a little something to help me get back to the project. I'm going to ask you this. Would you vote to name the house after my niece, Suzanne, as a tribute to her and in her memory? And they said, absolutely, we would love to do that. So that's the genesis of that name. And when the house was dedicated, we had a lot of her family members come to the dedication, and a lot of her friends from school came. And I think everybody thought it was a really wonderful way to keep her, in mind, keep her in memory.
And Queen Street was the first house that you actually worked on.
Queen Street was the very first Matthew 25 house.
Okay, so that hangs it all together.
Yeah.
Now, also in looking at the notes on this, I see that it's also the childhood home of Frances Perkins, who was the first female cabinet member in U.S. history, and she also served as a Secretary of Labor under Franklin Roosevelt.
She was Secretary of Labor for all of Franklin Roosevelt's presidency.
Wow.
So she is
Lifetime job.
Lifetime job. So she is the one who would have overseen, the implementation of the Social Security Act,
Sure.
Fair labor standards, minimum wage, and the National Labor Relations Act, regulating.
CCC?
She would have been involved in that, perhaps peripherally. I don't think that was under her department technically, but it could well have been.
Wow.
So she was an extraordinary woman who was born and raised in Worcester. She went to classical high school. She went on to University of Pennsylvania, to the Wharton School of Economics, and got involved in government and became Secretary of Labor under Franklin Roosevelt.
And this same house that she was involved with, childhood home and so forth, historic, and it was about to be razed.
It was about to be
And you saved
demolished, and we were able to save it.
Amazing.
And I think it's great that we have, there really is like two women's issues involved with this house in a way.
Indeed.
My niece, is a victim of domestic violence. Her name is on the house. Frances Perkins, who was a pioneer, for women, was raised in that house. And so I think that connection is really wonderful.
It's phenomenal. I didn't really recognize it until we discussed it. Tell me about some of the other houses.
Well, we had a lot of support on that first house from students from Holy Cross College. They would come and do interior demolition, and as the project moved on, they helped with landscaping, they helped with interior painting, they helped with insulating the house. They did so many things. Plus, I was getting substantial donations from Holy Cross alumni. And I thought it would be appropriate to recognize the contribution that Holy Cross students and alumni had made to the project so far. So the second house is called Crusader House.
Okay.
Yeah, you may be familiar with the Holy Cross Crusaders up on College Hill.
Yeah, I've heard of them.
And
Season ticket holder.
well, very good. Keep buying those season tickets.
I do.
And it's a great school, a lot of wonderful people up there, a lot of generous people. And I thought naming the house Crusader House was an appropriate way to thank them and let them know that, everyone in Matthew 25 was grateful for what they have been doing.
There's also a firefighter house.
There's a firefighter house. That's our sixth house. Anybody from Worcester is going to remember that disastrous warehouse fire in 1999 when 6 firefighters were killed. Sometime after that tragedy
That was on
happened.
Chris's birthday, by the way.
Really?
Yeah,
That was
my son, Chris.
December,
Yeah,
I believe.
December 3rd.
And we had an invitation from the city manager at the time to be involved with a project. It was called Project Remember. And there were 6 different groups in the city, each involved with housing. And we were asked if we would each do a house in memory of the firefighters. And I was so gung-ho about that project. I thought it was a great way to remember the firefighters. And we had a house that we had just acquired at 52 May Street. And it's a beautiful house. This house also is on the Massachusetts Historical Register. The front part of the house is 1840 Greek Revival.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And the back of the house is an addition that went on about 1870. We totally restored that house. We called it Firefighter House. If anyone is in the May Street area, it's number 52. On the porch, we have Firefighter House, Matthew 25. And on the eaves, under the front porch, we have the names of all 6 of the firefighters.
Beautiful.
Of the 6 organizations that did a house in memory of the firefighters, I think we were the only ones who actually put their names on the house. So they were put there at the time of the dedication. They're still there today, and hopefully they'll be there for decades.
Amen.
And decades to come.
Unfortunately, because of the tragedy, but nonetheless, you should never forget. It's too important to this community. One more house that I'd be really neglected if I didn't mention is located at 96 Chatham Street. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I have a special interest in that one. It's called the Louise and Fred Enman House. It's named after my mother and father. And they were great people who did a great job raising me and my sister. They were wonderful neighbors. Everybody loved them. They were very kind and very generous. My dad was very handy, would do carpentry, electrical, or plumbing for the neighbors, at no charge. My mom was really sweet and did a lot of things for people. So as a priest, whenever I do a wedding or a baptism, people often ask me, well, Father, is there anything we can do for you? I said, well, if you'd like, you can make a donation to Matthew 25, and I'll put it in a fund for my mom and dad. And I've been helping out at St. Mary's Parish in Holden for about 23 years now, every other weekend, and a lot of the parishioners there have made contributions. This money has gone into a fund, the Louise and Fred Enman Fund, to help to rehabilitate a house and for low-income families. And we finally got a property at a very reasonable price at 96 Chatham Street. And the money that had been raised, we used to make improvements on it. And so that name, that house bears their name.
Great. And finally, you're under construction is 3 Benefit Terrace.
Yes.
And that'll be dedicated to Father Joseph LeBron.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that one.
Well, Father LeBran was Father LeBran was a fixture at the College of the Holy Cross here in Worcester. He was a chaplain, and his time as chaplain there ranged over 4 decades.
Wow.
He was very well known by the Holy Cross students. And after he died, some of his friends, who were also friends of mine, came to me and said, Father Fred, we would like to put Father LeBran's name on a Matthew 25 house. How much do you think that would cost? And I told them, well, the Society of St. Vincent de Paul of the Diocese of Worcester just gave us $50,000 to do a house, and we're naming it the St. Vincent de Paul House. So I'm thinking, maybe around $50,000. And the representative of the group, Ryan Sutherland, from the class of 93 at Holy Cross, or perhaps class of 94, said to me, well, we think we can raise $60,000, so $50,000 should not be a problem. And Brian went out with his friends and raised the $60,000.
Isn't that great?
So that was the initial money to transform this abandoned house on Benefit Terrace into some quality, affordable rental housing.
When will that be completed?
That should be completed later this year. We're probably about 85% of the way done with that house right now. And hopefully it will be completed by Thanksgiving time, and we'll have a dedication around Thanksgiving or in December.
And by that time, once it's completed, I'm sure you'll have the tenants lined up to.
We will have tenants lined up. And a nice portion of the tribute is Father LeBrand was one of the two co-founders of the Mustard Seed Catholic Worker House here in Worcester.
Wow.
This would have been back in the 1960s or the early 1970s. He, along with Frank Kartheiser, who's still here in Worcester, were the real driving force behind getting that up and running.
That's great.
So Father LeBrand had a commitment to the poor, commitment to the needy, was always looking out for people. So I think he would be very pleased that a Matthew 25 house that's going to provide some quality, affordable rental housing for two families would be a great way to remember him.
Who could not agree with that? It's a beautiful, beautiful sentiment, and for good reason. Where does the program go from here? And we have about 2 minutes left, so it's tough to encapsulate all that. But also, how can the viewers participate in Matthew 25? You might want to start with that.
Sure. I'm hoping that the program will expand in other parts of Worcester, and we already have one house in Boston. I'm hoping it might expand into other areas as well. We're blessed to have a lot of helpers. We have Worcester Technical High School, who provide us with electrical services and plumbing and heating and carpentry and painting and decorating. And Youth Build program here in Worcester has been providing excellent carpentry services for us. We need donations, financial donations, so that I can buy the materials that these wonderful volunteers need to bring the task to completion. So one way to do that would be to go to our website, which is at www.mat25.org. And there's a link there that you can click on to make a donation online. Or you could give me a call if you're interested at 617-552-1910, 617-552-1910. So I thank you very much for this opportunity to share my experiences of Matthew 25 with you. And I have just been so blessed to have so many people involved with Matthew 25. I see a lot of generosity.
You're the catalyst in making it happen. And folks, you've heard Father, you know what they do. Help out. Go to the website, get in touch, do what you can to help out, because it's something that's going to help you. You'll feel good about yourself, but you'll also feel better about the city of Worcester. That's what this is all about. Good night, and thanks for watching us. Look forward to seeing you next week.